Hello, everybody. This is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. This is Echoes of War, the podcast series. I'm joined here by my co-host, Gareth. How are you?
Hey Greg, great to be back, and we are joined by our guest as well on this incredible series. And today's episode is the most famous event of the series.
Scholar, professor, PhD. Anything else we should add to your titles, Mr.
Fulham
Daniel?
supporter.
Yeah, Fulham supporter. For any Man United fans in the audience, I will be going easy on you because we play you tomorrow. So I will be primarily making fun of Liverpool, maybe a bit Arsenal. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry, but the table position speaks differently.
Well, after one match.
Yes.
And this is
And-
definitely going to be a absolute crowd pleaser. I'm sure everyone's aware of what the episode is. The title will, of course, be The Battle of Thermopylae, the one made famous by the great writer Frank Miller. Of course, not Herodotus. But before we jump into it, I just want to say, if you'd like to further support the channel, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/The Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to an exclusive podcast series, which is not exclusive to the Pacific War by any means. You get early access to all the content I make and voting rights for the subjects I'll tackle next. And the latest episode, for those curious, is actually not even history-based. It was looking at Sauron's plan to defeat everyone in Middle-earth. So it was the Lord of the Rings one. Tried something different.
more likely to occur than his boss could ever get.
Yeah, that might surprise people. Yeah, he was definitely... He outdid Morgoth, for sure. But we'll get into that here. And going to leave the Daniel to set the table as to how does the Battle of Thermopylae come about?
So when we last left off, Persians have been defeated at Marathon by the Athenians. And we're looking at 10 years after the Battle of Marathon. Xerxes has inherited his father's throne and also his father's vendetta against the Greeks. However, before he can invade Greece again, he does have to put down a revolt in Egypt. So he puts down this revolt in Egypt, and since he has all of these forces gathered to crush the revolt, he basically has enough, including his standing army, the Immortals, to conquer Greece anyway. He, however, is not going to make the same mistakes as his father did. He's planning on marching overland through Thrace and Macedon, including a large naval contingent and large numbers of supplies and troops, so that if he goes into Greece, he's taking the entire thing, and his troops are not going to be bottled up in the Bay of Marathon, as Datis's troops were during the previous campaign. And so Xerxes...
Dan?
Yep.
So the reason he decided to go right away was since the Egyptian expedition, which no doubt consumed a lot of his manpower and resources, the armies had already been mobilized by his satrapies, so it made sense for him to just already take those under arms, right? Instead of demobilizing them and then
Yeah.
remobilizing fresh recruits, which would have probably cost him at least a year.
Yeah. Logistics for the Persian Empire are actually very impressive, as we'll soon discover. It also helps that he has about an army of 10,000 heavy infantry, known as the Immortals, which serve as both his personal army and also his imperial guard. Now,
Do you want to maybe elaborate a bit about the Immortals, right? They are like the late equivalent is, they're the Praetorian Guards of the Roman Emperor.
Yeah, these are the crack troops of the Persian Empire, like the best of the best. And they're nicknamed the Immortals because they have magic samurai powers, like in the film. Just kidding. The reason why they're called the Immortals is because once one man falls or is injured in the line of duty, there's always another man to replace him. So the constant fighting strength of the Immortals is at 10,000 consistently.
This is just like an image I just pulled up of how they would be. And quite rare for many Achaemenid troops, barring the Greek mercenaries, you could say.
Yeah.
They have a fair amount of armor.
Yeah. Xenophon depicts the Immortals in his writings as wearing basically bronze armor, and they will wear heavy scale armor as well. In equipment, it's roughly the same as it's comparable to a hoplite, but there are variations. The shield isn't as large as an aspis, like the large hoplite shield that also covers the man next to you. And the spear is also a lot shorter than a doru spear that the Greeks use.
But they were also capable archers as well, right? So they were
Yeah,
not just pure melee infantry.
yeah. Also very capable archers. There is a coloured frieze on, or I think more accurately, a sort of mosaic on the walls of Persepolis depicting immortals in sort of palace garb, and they do hold a spear and also a quiver of arrows, sort of reflecting that dual-use role on the battlefield.
Can I just add that if you play with the Achaemenids and Age of Empires 2 Glory for Greece campaign, you can actually switch them about. The unique unit is range and melee.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And I think one interesting thing about the Persian immortals is the tunic, as you can see here, it's purple, which
Yeah,
is pretty significant because
yeah,
in the ancient world, getting the purple dye, it was pretty expensive. So
yeah,
that's why if you see like the Phoenicians, the Persian elites, the Greeks, Romans, right, having purple is very important. It's like signifying that you have wealth and power because you're able to afford it.
definitely. And if you read ancient texts, you might find the phrase called Tyrian purple. It's because purple dye was effectively a monopoly of the city of Tyre in Phoenicia in the modern day Levant. And I think the way they get purple dye is through grinding up the shells or some parts of this very super rare
It's
mollusk.
an urchin.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah,
it was an urchin or something, right?
yeah.
That
It's
they
some
would
kind of
grind.
mollusk or urchin.
Well, all you just need is a land bridge to take Tyre.
Yeah. Yeah, so very expensive, and obviously a mark of the great wealth of the Persian king that he could field 10,000 of these in the best equipment and also in the most dapper equipment at the same time as being effective.
So it's like someone just wanting to show off maybe like 100 Ferraris today.
Yeah, if for example, if you think about sort of I don't know how sort of the sort of high tech US military, you know that it's very effective. It will kill you, and you also know how expensive it is. And so it's very much shock and awe that you see someone with the best equipment and all this money in order to field this, and you sort of even before you clash arms, you sort of have this in your mind thinking, well, this probably isn't going to end very well for me, so maybe I find another way to settle this.
It just infuriates me that the Roman equivalent, the Praetorian Guards, were like the only imperial bodyguard that were just crybabies, not actual field forces.
Yeah, the Varangians, the Byzantine Guard, have a pretty good reputation.
I was speaking for the Roman Empire, not the Byzantines, because the
Same
Varangians
thing,
were tough.
same thing, buddy.
All right, all right. But yeah, I guess let's turn back the clock, and get back to Xerxes' Egyptian expedition and planning for Greece.
Yeah, obviously, uh, it's a bit of a walk going from Persia into Thrace and then Macedonia. The primary barrier is a water barrier, the Hellespont, which is the sort of narrowest strait between Europe and Asia. It's around
On this map,
yeah,
it's like where we could see Abydos on the map,
yeah,
right? I think that's the
yeah,
area.
yeah. It's a very strong sort of strategical position. And even during the late medieval period, the Ottomans sort of have trouble sort of trying to hold on to this area and sort of trying to take it from the Byzantines, and they have this bit of a conflict over that. But Xerxes creates an ingenious way of shipping his massive army across, and he does this by effectively lining up a bunch of boats across the strait, tying them together, and also paving them. So he puts lots of planks on top of the boats, and this creates this massive pontoon bridge in which his army can traverse across. And these bridges are sort of become very important as the campaign continues. And especially what gains a lot of cultural significance for the Greeks are the sort of cables and ropes that tie the bridges together. Because this is exactly as the picture shows. All of these ropes have to be extremely strong in order to hold this bridge together, because considering the large numbers of Persian troops that are about to cross the Hellespont, this bridge is going to have to withstand quite a lot of punishment.
And might I just add for the audience's benefit, he built two such bridges. The so if I'm not mistaken, the northeasternly bridge was used for, it consists of 360 ships lashed together,
Yeah,
and the southern one, southeastern one, which was relatively shorter, it's about 314 ships. Now, granted, these are like not the triremes, which will be important, right? Because the triremes are like your
yeah,
main war horse of your navies at this time. These are still,
yeah,
it's a still a sizable force of the pentagoners that were lashed together.
yeah. And the ships that are being lashed together, obviously they're not triremes, they're sort of larger sort of ships that you use for transportation. So they're a lot bulkier and they're able to stay at sea a lot longer. With a trireme, there's all this sort of logistics of having sort of all the oars, all the oar holes, and having places where people can sort of sleep and sit down. Whereas with these kinds of basically tubs, you can just fill them up with items and then sail them wherever you please. And this leads me on to actually talking about how big the Persian army is. It it is probably the biggest army ever seen in the ancient world at this point. Herodotus estimates that about 5.3 million soldiers are involved on the Persian side. This
Oh,
is
not a
obvious.
billion and a half or something?
No, he was very conservative in this actually. But considerable number of forces. We have Arabians, you've got Phoenicians, Ionians, Paphlagonians, Lydians, all troops from all over the Persian Empire, including India. Maybe not the massive Oliphants from the Lord of the Rings, but still a pretty sizable number of forces.
Would they have also had Greek mercenaries, since merc companies were a thing at this time as well? And
Yeah,
given the proximity and having Ionia back under their control now for 10 years, I might add,
yeah,
wouldn't the Ionian cities could have also been, forced to contribute?
yeah. And the Persian naval components of about 1,200 triremes. It's mostly Ionians and Phoenicians. So the Ionians are contributing to the naval components of the expedition. And you all have all kinds of Persian troops. You've got Arab troops riding camels, and you've got chariots as well. Xerxes is very much bringing sort of the sort of combined might of the Persian Empire across the Hellespont into Greece. So naturally, when the Greeks find out about this, they're a little concerned about this massive army that's coming to subjugate them. And
May I just add one thing? The 5.3 million number is actually including the support personnel, so your cooks,
Yeah.
camp servants, and such.
Yeah,
It's about 2.6 million is what Herodotus quotes
yeah,
as the combat troops, with him claiming that it was about 240,000 crewmen for the triremes, which are 1,207 of them, and 36,000 marines, because it's usually they kept about 30 marines on the Persian ships per vessel. And there were about 3,000 galleys, right, which are much smaller
yeah,
vessels, which are 50 odd pentagoners, 30 odd light galleys, and horse transports for the cavalry.
yeah,
They account for about almost 250,000 men. So the total naval component is, by Herodotus's count, is 517,000 people.
Yeah.
And he claims that, from all the ethnic groups he mentioned, right, the Indians, the Mycenaeans, Assyrians, Lydians, Egyptians, Thracians as well, there are like 47 ethnic groups, including the
Yeah.
Bactrians as well, no doubt, for their cavalry. He quotes the number at 1.7 million. Infantry, horse cavalry from Persia, Medes, India, Caspanians, that's around 80,000 horsemen, and 20,000 camel riders from Arabia and Libya,
Yeah.
which gives the total uh, land and sea component at around 2.3 million for him. And then he's saying, like, with the addition of the forces that he's going to subjugate right after he crosses the Hellespont,
Yeah.
those guys add in about 325,000 more people to his cause. So that is the size of the forces quoted by Herodotus.
Yeah.
So, and he just conveniently doubled it to 5.3 million for support personnel.
Yeah. And for any literary heads among you, Herodotus at the beginning of the history sort of has this, sort of draws the origins of the Greco-Persian conflict in this sort of larger East-West conflict, which includes the Trojan Wars. And the main source document of the Trojan Wars is this epic poem called the Iliad, written by Homer, probably the first Greek text that students will probably learn at university, at least. I can't remember what people learn at school anymore, I'm afraid.
Hey,
But
come on. The Iliad literally quoted that the Greek army had, like, what? When I made the calculations reading it, it said about 1,500 triremes, each about, like, supposed to have 120 warriors or something.
yeah, and so you have the catalogue of ships in Book 2 of the Iliad detailing all of the Greek contingents and all of the forces arrayed against Troy, just so you sort of have this catalogue of Persians and of ships as well, depicting the forces and large array of forces involved in this conflict. Also sort of framed as this East-West conflict in the larger Herodotean narrative. So you very much have this parallel of this Trojan War, and everyone loves the Trojan War. Ancients absolutely adore the Trojan War. If they had a choice, they'd be fighting the Trojan War every single day. You have this parallel between the Trojan War and also what Herodotus, in his view, is the greatest war of all time, the Persian Wars as well. Just a little point for our literary heads.
And let's just say now the modern estimates of the combat force is not 2.6 million, but people are not sure fully.
No,
But the
it's
modern
actually,
consensus is 120,000 to 300,000 is what I've read in multiple sources.
yeah.
It differs. Still humongous, considering most battles you'll read about that take place at this time, probably barring like ancient China, are usually like maybe what at the best 20,000 combatants on both sides.
Yeah, the logistics of like 100,000 to 300,000 men feeding those guys over the
Yeah.
distances they're going, that would be an insane feat. Yeah.
And you can assume this total camp size is at least 600,000 because you are going to have camp followers, laborers, and such.
Yeah.
You still got to feed them, even if you might be giving them half rations.
Absolutely. It's a massive logistical feat. And it also is a massive achievement of the Persian Empire that they're able to gather this huge army and also transport it across the sea into Europe, basically. And they're not finished yet. They still have a campaign to go to, and they'll move through Thrace and Macedonia, taking on supplies and also troops from their vassals in the region. So once the Greeks hear about this massive invasion force coming their way, Xerxes has given them some warning in advance because he sent the customary earth and water, asking for each of the individual city-states to subjugate, to sort of frustrate themselves.
Remember the well, folks.
Yeah.
Remember the well.
Yeah. He doesn't offer this courtesy to Athens and Sparta because in previous embassies they've just literally thrown the Persian ambassadors down wells. And so that's part of the reason why Xerxes has sworn bloody vengeance on the Greeks, and especially on Athens. And in response to this, the Greeks gather at a conference. They have this massive conference of lots of different city-states. The members of what we will colloquially call the Allies, it represents about 10% of all the Greek city-states that are independent. There are some pretty noticeable absences or just withdrawals from the alliance. Thebes is probably the city-state that's closest to the Persian army. Beetia is north of Athens, and it's sort of between Thessaly and Athens and Attica. And so the Persians, to get to Athens, will move through Beetia as well.
It's, I think, quite detailed on this map here. Craig, could you just zoom in a little bit on the central part? Beetia is like in the gray.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the thing is that just because there's a war going on,
I can't fully blame the Thebans for this, since even Macedonia and Thessaly also joined.
Yeah. But there's also an additional reason that might persuade the Thebans, is that the Thebans are the primary rival of Athens just over the border, and they hate the Athenians, and the feeling is mutual. So anything that destroys Athens is good for Thebes. And it's also involved
political backstabbing.
Yeah. A similar situation.
That's every day of the Greeks.
Yeah. A similar situation also applies to Argos in the Peloponnese. They governed the region of Argolis, and they had recently lost a pretty devastating war against Sparta, in which most of their military power in the region was destroyed. And so they do attend the conference. However, they demand leadership over the entire Greek alliance. The Greek alliance, including Sparta, are obviously not open to this idea. I think
were they not open to it, or they laughed the hell out of at their faces?
If you actually read Diodorus Siculus, the actual conversation goes something like, so if we don't really care if you don't want to be in this alliance, if you value the leadership of the Greeks over being subjugated by the Persians, because they're sort of making a meal out of this sort of title of leader of the Greeks, which they're not really in a position to claim. So so these are two sort of quite serious. These are the two regions that are left out of the Greek alliance. So among the Greek alliance, you will find Sparta and the Peloponnesian League, and the Athenians, and also various Greek city-states from across the region, such as Euboea, Lesbos.
Can I just add something very interesting about Argos's defeat to the Spartans?
Yeah.
Leonidas' father was the one that destroyed them in that battle.
Yeah. And he did such a thorough job, because not only did he defeat the main Argive force, he also pursued them into a sacred grove and then set the grove on fire, killing all the soldiers. It's a major act of sacrilege, and it's sort of linked to how Cleomenes also goes mad, which leads to Leonidas taking over the throne. But this serious act of sacrilege actually effectively destroys Argive military capability for a generation, effectively. And also makes Argos absolutely hate Sparta at the same time. So having Argos and Sparta in the same alliance, it was always going to be a bit of a reach. Not only do the Greeks gather at this conference and sort of discuss what they're going to do, they also send ambassadors over to the further corners of the Greek world. So they sent ambassadors to Crete, requesting help, and also they send ambassadors to the Greek cities in Sicily, specifically to Gelon, the tyrant of Syracuse, requesting for help. And Herodotus quotes that the message they send is that they should all sort of unite as Greeks, since the danger threatened all Greeks alike. All of Greek blood might unite and work jointly for one common end. So you very much have this language of we as Greek people are going to unite and also have the same common goal, which is to defeat the Persians. Unfortunately, Syracuse is currently occupied fighting a massive invasion from Carthage, so Gelon is unable to send forces to help.
Oh yeah, it's around this time the start of the Sicilian Punic Wars, right?
Yeah.
And Greeks fighting Greeks is pretty normal, right, at this time of year?
Yep. In fact, Athens and Aegean are currently still at war because Athens and Aegean hate each other. And we'll cover this.
Who doesn't hate Athens? Just want to confirm that, please.
Plataea doesn't hate Athens. It's basically one of the only Greek city-states that doesn't. Fair. And then Argos in the following century. Because Argos also hates Sparta, and since Sparta hates Athens, so does... You know how Greek diplomacy works? In a pretty ballsy move, the Greeks do send spies over into the Persian camp in order to assess how large the Persian army is. The spies end up getting caught by Xerxes, and Xerxes gives them a tour of the Persian camp, showing them all the different contingents. Then he sends them back to Greece.
These like Scipio Africanus with Hannibal's Scythian spies.
Yeah. Now, the initial Greek plan is to attempt to hold the Persian army up in Thessaly. There's a sort of vale or sort of mountain pass by the name of Tempe in the north of Thessaly, bordering Macedonia, where they think they can muster enough forces to hold the Persian army from advancing. It's basically Thermopylae. Is basically what they're trying to do at Thermopylae later on. The problem is that...
Can I just say, Tempe is, I think, the place where Alexander, when he ascended to the throne of Macedonia, rode south, right? And this is where the Thessalians blocked him, and he cut the steps across with his horsemen and rode to the rear.
Yeah. It's in Greek warfare, in history of Greek warfare, you'll always find sort of some spots or areas come up more often than others. This is the case with sort of, especially in a place like Boeotia, which has, like, it used to have in ancient times a massive lake, so there was only really one way or two ways that armies could traverse. So places like Thermopylae, Tempe will show up just because they're very defensible positions and people keep using them. The problem with Tempe that they find out is that there are two mountain paths that flank the Greek position, and so while they do send the force up into Thessaly, the force basically immediately turns back to Greece once they find out about this mountain path, and also at the sheer size of the Persian army, they don't think they can hold them in Thessaly. And interestingly,
apparently Alexander, I think we were getting to the same point. Alexander the First of Macedon.
Yeah, Alexander the First of Macedon is the one who tells the Greeks about the two mountain paths. Alexander is actually a vassal of the Persian Empire. However, one thing I can't stress enough, all Greek cities and state actors all pursue their own ends in the ancient Greek world. It is not a very good thing for Macedon for Xerxes to have this gigantic mother of all armies crossing in from Asia into Europe, potentially eating all of his supplies in Macedon, much less the Persians having a sustained presence there in the region. And furthermore, the Macedonian dynasty, the Argead dynasty, also it also purports to have links to Greece. There's a reason why it's called the Argead dynasty. It's because they claim descent from migrants from Argos, who then went from Argos to Macedonia. And this is sort of the grounds in the following century for Macedonian participation in the Olympic Games. This sort of shared Greek heritage.
The Greeks really looked down on the Macedonians as like, they're barbarians. To Greeks, anyone who's not Greek is a barbarian.
Yeah. So Macedon at this play is sort of playing a game where they're formally loyal to Persia. However, they do want to pursue their own interests, and it does help that Macedonia is on the peripheries, the very western periphery of the Persian Empire. It's on the European side of the border, and it's past Thrace. So they do not want Persian control over more than basically where they are. Although, one thing is that Macedon does also border Thessaly, and so the general rule is Greek neighbours will always hate one another, so naturally Macedon will hate Thessaly. So having a Persian army occupy Thessaly and potentially weaken Thessaly for the future would actually be favourable to Macedon. So managing to convince...
You gotta love Greek politics
Yeah.
at this time.
So managing to convince the Greeks to leave Thessaly to the Persians for them to ravage and occupy is actually a win in his book, so long as the Persians lose the war in the end. But this effectively means that Thermopylae is the only option to stop the Persian army, because if the further the Persian army moves into Greece, the more likely that each individual Greek city will sort of feel effects of the shock and awe of the massive army, and then end up defecting to the Persians, what is called Medizing, where you side with the Medes. And the one they're most concerned about is Thebes, because Thebes is actually a pretty major military power, and Thebes hates Athens, Persia hates Athens, they're aligned in this. And also Thebes is on the way to Athens, and so the Thebans aren't exactly going to mind letting a Persian army march straight through their territory to destroy Attica. Thermopylae becomes the place where the Greeks have to make their stand.
And considering the public cause of Xerxes is still like to avenge the Athenian intervention in the Ionian revolt, which was not avenged in the first invasion. So it's easy for Thebes to see that, let them just go to Athens.
Yeah, there's enough plausible denial. I mean, everyone acts in their own interests. And yes, it's objectively seen as a bad thing to Medize in the ancient Greek world, especially during the Persian Wars. But bear in mind, this last alliance of Hellenes only constitutes about a tenth of independent Greek city-states. So they are in a bit of the minority here. And at this conference, the Greeks cook up their plan of how to hold the Persians back at Thermopylae. The plan is for a land force led by Sparta and the Spartan king Leonidas to hold what will be called the Hot Gates, to basically funnel the Persian army into this narrow pass and hold them there, because the combined Greek army has more than enough soldiers in order to hold back the Persians in the pass. Meanwhile, a naval contingent it's nominally led by a Spartan admiral named Eurybiades. However, the Athenians constitute the most ships, and so Themistocles, as the commander of the Athenians, ends up having a lot of influence in this.
You mean practical command?
Yeah. He'll be in practical command because no self-respecting Athenian triarch is going to be taking orders from like this landlubber Spartan. And the naval forces are going to hold back all the Persian ships in the Strait of Artemisium in order to prevent the Persians just sailing past, which they actually end up trying to do. The Persian naval command tried to pull a Datis and split off a contingent of ships to sail around Euboea. However, serves them right, all of their ships end up getting destroyed in a storm, and so that threat ends up getting neutralized. And
I think the map shown by Greg right now is pretty accurate in what it's showing, like it's the fate. But you can see, right, moving through the Straits of Artemisium on the naval side, that is the only other route that they have, since galleys are not deep water vessels, so they are not going to be sending the army through, the Ionian Islands. And this is probably the safest harbor because it's not going to be as exposed to storms.
Yeah. So the only problem with this plan is that Spartans are supposed to make up the majority of the land contingent. However, they are celebrating a religious festival, again, just like during the Battle of Marathon, and it's the same religious festival, the Carneia. So the Spartan army actually can't march out of Sparta, otherwise it's an act of sacrilege It also doesn't help that there's an Olympic truce on right now. So obviously the Spartans are very pious, as are the other Greeks. So the Spartan elders do make an exception, however, that Leonidas himself can march up to the hot gates. However, he can only really march out with his bodyguard of 300 Spartans.
Or as the movie said, right? The
Yeah.
Spartan army cannot move, so he's just going on an excursion with 300 bodyguards, right?
Yeah, because he's not technically leading a Spartan army. He's leading a Greek Pan-Hellenic army that also happens to include his Spartan bodyguards. And these Spartan
And I
bodyguards,
think
they're also called the hippies, which means knights in ancient Greece. It means knights in ancient Greece, but they're not mounted soldiers. They'll ride to the place of battle, dismount, equip themselves, and then fight on foot. Much like a sort of early modern dragoon, basically. And these hippies are effectively the best of the Spartan army, because they're the bodyguards of the king. Especially the case because Leonidas takes with him basically 300 Spartan veterans. All of these men are supposed to have already sired children and sons. So the loss of these soldiers won't sort of damage Spartan demography as they would if he had brought sort of young Spartans at the same time. Accompanying the Spartans...
And I would just say one thing. Leonidas's role by the Greek allies to take command of the land forces was actually quite well received by all
Yeah.
the states, because they really respected this man.
Yeah.
Even the Athenians.
Yeah. And the Athenians are willing to sort of make concessions because it is their city at the highest risk of being destroyed, because Xerxes has a personal vendetta against him. So, although they command the largest naval contingents, they will concede for a Spartan to become admiral of the entire Greek fleet and to serve under him, although operationally they will be sort of controlling things, but the sort of symbolic head of the fleet will be a Spartan, and the Spartans are very much sort of the leaders of this alliance, because much of the alliance includes Peloponnesian city-states, and Sparta is the leader of the Peloponnesian League. So it's
I think this is just like an example of the frontline soldier that we're going to be talking about, like the Spartan hoplites, right?
Yeah.
This is how they're going to be armed for battle, with the Sparta logo clearly mentioned on the shields. Might add, this was pretty unique to only Sparta, right?
Yeah.
They were the only ones that exclusively kept the city-states logo on their shields, whereas everyone else used fancy designs of their own choice.
Yeah, it really depends. You'll find Athenian troops with the Owl of Athens, or the Club of Heracles is also a very popular symbol for Theban troops. But
I'm talking about like as a majority.
Yeah. But as a majority where it's almost uniform, you do have variations revealed in sort of all these sort of laconic little stories about Spartans being weird. So there's this one story where a Spartan is sort of painting a fly, like a tiny fly, onto a shield, and one of his fellow hoplites sort of goes, "Why are you doing that? That's weird even by our standards." And he sort of says, "Because when I'm up close to the enemy and bashing this into his face, that fly is going to be the size of a lion." So yeah, a little bit of
that's Laconian.
humor. Yeah. The Laconians are very known for their sort of witticisms and their humour, and so a lot of this survives through our textual sources. And because Sparta is the commander of the Peloponnesian League, a lot of Peloponnesians also come. You've got the Perioikoi, who are the sort of other cities in Laconia who aren't Sparta, but who are sort of vassals of Sparta, and they'll contribute regular hoplites rather than the sort of highly trained, disciplined Spartan hoplites that the audience might be familiar with.
So it's like for the Spartans, their hoplites are tier 1, these guys are tier 2.
Yeah. Spartans are tier 1, and Hippias Spartans are tier 1 with upgrades from the blacksmith. You also have
Remember, people
Mantineans.
maximize your XP
Yeah.
XP gains.
You've got all kinds of Greek cities, from Mantinea, Tegea, Orchomenos, the Corinthians. Even the Mycenaeans sent 80 soldiers. And not just the Peloponnesians are rocking up, but also the Thespians, the Phocians, the Malians, and even 400 Thebans, which Herodotus identifies as these sort of hostages in order to ensure the loyalty of the city of Thebes, so it doesn't just revolt from behind the Greek lines.
They're already there, but yeah.
Yeah.
But this gives the total force of around the 7,000 Greek
Yeah.
soldiers
Yeah.
that were going to be defending the pass. And it's not just 300, which is
Yeah.
commonly accepted. Or known. I won't say it's commonly accepted, it's commonly known.
Yeah, it's part of the legend of these Spartan soldiers, and to be fair, as we'll find out, the 300 Spartans are sort of singled out for their valor during this battle, but we will cover that in due course. Now, one thing that should be made a note of, and is that Leonidas, according to Herodotus, has been a recipient of a Delphic prophecy, which states that either he dies in the coming battle, or the city of Sparta will be destroyed by the Persians. So, by him leading the Greek army to Thermopylae and potentially dying in the battle, he's sort of, in the grand cosmic scheme of things, preventing the destruction of Sparta. I don't know whether
taking one for the team.
Yeah, I don't know whether people have inferred this, but I have a lot of skepticism about all stories involving the Delphic Oracle, not because of any sort of doubts, because I believe that the Greeks believe in the Delphic Oracle and that it can tell the future. It's nothing about the Delphic Oracle itself. It's about sort of provenance and audit trail of all these stories involving it. That, for me, they're all a bit too convenient. And for the Spartan Leonidas prophecy, where he has to die or city of Sparta is destroyed, I personally think that this is a lot of copium from the Spartans. I think the Spartans...
Kind of like that romanticism that would have probably come afterwards, right? Like Achilles' heel was a later invention from the Iliad.
But I think it's more than romanticism. I think it's outright copium, as I will explain later in this episode. So, both the Persians and the Greeks, and we've covered both the composition of both forces, they reached the pass of Thermopylae, and once the Greeks and the Persians reach the pass, they proceed to encamp and sit down and do nothing for the first couple of days. Effectively, what happens is a bit of a standoff between the Greeks and the Persians, because the Persians can't quite comprehend how there are so few Greeks involved, lined up in front of them, because they've brought all these forces from all corners of the empire, and there are literally just 7,000 Greeks standing in a mountain pass, just waiting for them.
Psst. Hey you ever hear me talk about some great Pacific War movie or documentary like Pearl Harbor Minute by Minute over on Netflix and feel the urge to watch it for yourself? Uh-oh, you live in Japan, and your Netflix doesn't have it? Must suck to be you.
Sucks to be me right now.
Oh wow, Season 4 of Demon Slayer is out. Oh wait, I can't watch it on Canadian Netflix, but it's over on Japan Netflix? Whatever will I do?
Oh, no.
Being blocked from regional content? With private internet access, you too can watch Demon Slayer Season 4 by switching your IP address to Japan.
Yes! Hell yeah!
Why stop with Japan? With private internet access, you can change your IP address to over 84 different countries and every single US state, giving you access to region-restricted content all over the world.
Nice.
Many websites and services like Netflix are only accessible depending on your physical location, but private internet access helps you overcome these restrictions. Think about it. Without private internet access, it's like paying for a TV series and missing out on the latest season. Shots fired, Demon Slayer on Canadian Netflix.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Ever fear people are gonna find your Google searches?
Banzai! Banzai! Banzai!
FBI, open up!
Private internet access makes sure that those Google searches remain a buried secret, as private internet access encrypts your internet access and has a no logs policy. Think you're safe with the local coffee shop's free Wi-Fi? No, you are certainly not. Private internet access gives you more privacy features than any other software and real-time protection from malware and trackers, giving you peace of mind knowing those Google searches remain seen by you and you alone. Private internet access has a no-log policy that they've defended in court, which means they are not storing any of your browsing data. Hey, are you like me using different devices under one household? Private internet access is available on all platforms and protects an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. I personally use private internet access to unblock movies and TV series from all across the globe, and I sleep easier writing scripts for my YouTube channel and others knowing my data is secure. Look, this is a no-brainer. Sign up with my link in the description of this video to get 83% off, plus 4 months for free, so it ends up being only around $2 per month. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available. So don't forget to click www.piavpn.com/the Pacific War Channel, and a big thanks to Private Internet Access for sponsoring this video.
And Xerxes is quite curious about the Spartans specifically, and so he sends a scout to oversee the Greek camp, and the scout sees a bunch of Spartan warriors oiling up with like the olive oil, sort of grooming their hair, putting their makeup on, regular Spartan things. So the scout's like, "Oh my god, what the hell is this?" So he goes back to Xerxes and he's like, "Yeah, these Spartans are weird. Like they're dressing up and like preparing like all these cosmetics and like grooming their hair. They're not. It doesn't look like they're preparing for battle." And this exiled Spartan king staying in the Persian camp called Demaratus, he's sort of serving as this military attaché and advisor. He corrects Xerxes and he sort of says, "This is them preparing for battle. They want to look their best when they die." And
So it's like winning isn't essential, looking good is more.
Yeah. And if you consider sort of ancient Greek culture, looking good equals, there's a sort of parallel between looking good and being moral. So because the Spartans are making themselves look beautiful, they've got their hair, they're oiled up, they're all muscular, they sort of appear among the other fellow Greeks as this epitome of Greek masculinity and of Greek valor. So not only is this supposed to impress like enemies and sort of weird them out, because like who does this other than Spartans, but the rest of the Greek army is sort of assured that the Spartans are ready to die and they're not just going to walk off.
I think the only time I know about like oiling before the battle that ever took place was Hannibal at the Battle of the Trebia.
Yeah.
Where Romans go through a frigid river in December and Hannibal has his guys just oiling up, eating breakfast before.
Yeah. 4 days pass because Xerxes genuinely thinks that the Greeks are going to run away at the very last second. They don't, and so he becomes extremely angry at their intransigence. And on the 5th day, he sends his soldiers to attack the pass. So just thousands of these Persian troops attack in waves, and they crash onto the Spartan phalanx because the Spartans are leading the line on the first day of battle.
They'll fight in the shade.
Yeah. And this is where the sort of legendary prowess of Spartan hoplites begins to sort of take place, because we're looking at the very best of the Spartan army versus the sort of drafts and conscripts of the Persians. And so as they keep sending all these waves and waves of soldiers, the Spartans do just hold the line. The line does not give. The Persian spears are just too short in order. They don't have enough the range that the Spartan Doru has. Spartans are able to sort of kill the Persians without being wounded themselves, a very little risk to them. And prior to the
same
battle,
logic as what made Philip and Alexander's phalanx quite deadly.
Yeah.
The length of the Sarissa, right?
Yeah. And even before, and the Spartans are also wearing heavy bronze hoplite equipment, so they've got the aspis shield covering both half of their bodies and also half of their comrades' bodies in the phalanx. And the bronze armor is strong enough to sort of to withstand arrow barrages, which the Persians, they sort of lose barrage of arrows in the very opening stages of the battle. The arrows don't kill anyone because the Greeks are very well equipped and the shields protect them as well as the large Corinthian helmets that they wear. So unless you're getting an arrow to the eye, chances are you're probably not being killed by a Persian arrow.
And armor actually worked, right? Like not like movies.
Yeah,
armor actually works.
The armor works.
And I think one thing I should also add, while the Spartans did lead the line, they rotated all the units throughout the first day at the front lines so that battle fatigue never impacted the Greeks on the first day.
Which is the reason why they deployed so many. They deployed 7,000 soldiers. And they're also calling on more reinforcements because they sort of see this massive Persian army and they sort of go, okay, we might need to bring a few more guys. So they are actually awaiting the main Spartan army, which will come once the full moon passes. So this battle lasts most of the day. However, the final attack is launched by the Immortals, the heavy infantry of the Persian king himself. So these 10,000 Immortals, led by a commander named Hydarnes, once all the Persian levies have been withdrawn, they were sort of there to soften the Spartans up and sort of tire them out. These Persian Immortals then take to the field and launch their attack.
And can I just say, according to one of the historians, sorry if I butcher the name, Sisteas, that the first waves were just cut to ribbons and maybe, according to him, just 2-3 Spartans fell in that.
Yeah. And these troops are much more heavily armored. However, the spear problem remains. Their spears are just too short to outrange the Spartan dories. And what's more, at some points in the battle, the Spartans actually turn and flee. And so this leads the Immortals to chase them. And then the Spartans will then turn around, form up, and then countercharge the Immortals while they're in disarray,
the feigned retreat.
Yeah. And I'm betting you probably wouldn't attribute this tactic to the Spartans, but it sort of shows that, yes, ancient sources do have this fascination with Sparta as this militaristic city-state, and with these sort of brutal and unusual customs, such as tying children to columns and whipping them, or sort of bathing their newborn children in wine to see if they're strong enough and abandoning them to the wild if they don't, or like murdering a helot in the middle of the night. However, in reality, at least in my view, what really makes the Spartans stand out is discipline and also individual unit cohesion, because when you have a feigned retreat, it is very, very easy. If you're not organized enough, if units don't fully precisely know or trust where other units are on the battlefield or what their intentions are, it's very easy for a feigned retreat to become a full retreat. It is very simple.
Greg, if you remember when we did our podcast episode on the Battle of Grunwald, this is like one of the biggest contention points even till this date.
Yeah.
Where did the Lithuanian cavalry actually like retreat for real, or was it a feigned retreat? And I still think it's in the middle, but as alluding to what Dan said, it has to be like proper unit cohesion. They should know that it's part of the plan to sell the story. Like the Mongols knew this because this tactic was, for example, their bread and butter.
Yeah.
Well, it was the entire tactic of the Mongol Empire. That was what they trained for, yeah.
And you also have to trust that the units that are also retreating with you aren't retreating for real, and they're going to come back the moment you come back as well. You need that full cohesion for everyone to sort of be of the same mind, which I think is what stands the Spartans apart from the other Greeks, because usually when a hoplite phalanx ends up retreating or sort of running backwards, usually that's a sign that a hoplite army has lost the battle and they're running away. How with the Spartans, you're never quite sure, because in this case, they could be doing a fake retreat. Yeah.
So it's like a throw of the die. But to your point of the unit cohesion, is it down to the fact of Spartan society?
Yeah.
Since all male Spartans, right, who are citizens, they have only one job in their life, which is to be
Yeah.
a soldier.
Yeah.
They don't work because that's what helots are for, and they train.
Yeah.
Whereas every other unit in every other city, those guys have a day job, you could
Yeah.
say. So they won't be able to develop that unit chemistry as often and as
Yeah.
sophisticated as a Spartan. So, like with
Yeah.
Spartan unit, you know what your guy next to you is actually going to do,
Yeah.
or at
And
least the
even-
chances magnet exponentially higher.
Yeah. And this is also reflected in the sort of Spartan mess system, where upon sort of graduating Spartan military training, each individual Spartan hoplite will have to sort of enlist or enroll into a sort of canteen or mess. And this is basically like almost sort of military units, almost, where as well as sort of rite of passage, because if you're such a shoddy soldier but somehow survive training, if you don't get accepted into a mess, you're basically a social pariah. So not only are they sort of training as a unit, they're also socializing and living and dining as a unit. So that sort of unit identity and cohesion is very much ingrained in Spartan culture and society. And so Herodotus, and that's not to say that Spartans aren't excellent soldiers, because they are. If you train enough as a Greek hoplite, you will end up inevitably being very good at your job. And so Herodotus describes the Spartan performance as so. The Lacedaemonians fought memorably, showing themselves skilled fighters amidst unskilled on many occasions, as when they would turn their backs and feign flight. The barbarians would see them fleeing and give chase with shouting and noise, but when the Lacedaemonians were overtaken, they would turn to face the barbarians and overthrow innumerable Persians.
I take it the immortal assault was a repeat of the first assaults.
Yeah. The Persians make no headway on the first day, and so night falls, and all the soldiers go back to their camps, preparing for a second day of battle. While this first day of battle was raging on, the Greek fleet was actually sitting around until late afternoon, and this was very much a deliberate choice from Themistocles, because customarily in ancient warfare, you will only really fight until the evening, because just coordinating troops during the day is difficult enough, but doing it at night is practically almost impossible. And so Themistocles chooses the late afternoon in order to engage the Persian navy, because that way the Persians won't have enough time to deploy all of their forces and sort of take advantage of their greater numbers. And so the Greeks can really put some damage onto the Persian fleet while minimizing the damage they take themselves. So on the first day of battle, while the Spartans are sort of bleeding their guts out and killing lots and lots of Persians, the Athenians are just sitting on the ships, waiting for go time, which is late afternoon after lunch. So they had an easy day at Artemisium. Night passes, and Xerxes, on the second day of battle, decides to go for the same plan again, sending in his men to attack the pass. And the logic behind this is that he believes that because the Greeks had been fighting at this pass for the entire day previously, that the Spartans would be too tired, and they would also not be able to have recovered their wounded. They wouldn't have been able to sort of look after their wounded, like they wouldn't have time to rest. And so he's going to sort of ramp up the pressure and keep on attacking the pass until the Greeks are eventually exhausted, because there are over 100,000 Persians and 7,000 Greeks, and the Persians did manage to kill a few of the Spartans on the previous day's fighting. So if you keep on going, chances are you are probably going to kill enough Spartans that they're going to have to fall back.
But I don't think he might have been aware that the Leonidas and the Greek commanders were rotating the units throughout the fight.
However, what he doesn't know is that the Greeks were actually rotating the units throughout the day. So Greek soldiers will be, I mean, they're not fully fresh, but they're not exhausted. And because of the heavy bronze equipment and the superior protection that the Greeks have, they haven't really sustained that many combat injuries. And so the second day's fighting very much follows the same sort of playbook as the first day's fighting. One notable difference is that Herodotus states that rather than the Spartans taking on the bulk of the fighting on the second day of battle, the rest of the allied Greeks do the majority of the fighting, and they're able to sort of rotate units between Persian attacks, and also fight as a cohesive front line, even though they're different units from different city-states. They're all they have enough faith in each other that none of them are prematurely running away or sort of screwing everyone else over and like leaving the battlefield without orders. And so a lot of attention rightfully goes to Spartan valor and also performance during the Battle of Thermopylae. However, I also think this sort of undersells how much of a miracle it is that that bunch of different Greek city-states were even able to work together and sort of have this coordination on a battlefield.
These amateurs, they do their part.
Yeah, even I can't recall many situations or examples where a bunch of different Greek city-states have banded together and fought as a single unit and battle line, and they're just not to be shenanigans that took place. It's almost unheard of. But second day of battle follows the same trend as the first. It's just that the allied Greeks take a greater role than the Spartans during the second day. Artemisium, they're still fighting. The Greek fleet are doing their job in stopping the Persians from just sailing past the main Greek force past Thermopylae.
And this day, actually, there also was not much fighting, since Themistocles kept the same tactic of engaging in the late afternoon onwards.
Yeah.
The only notable occurrences was a successful ambush by the Athenians of a retreating Persian contingent, which were like survivors from the storm that were lost of the more open coast of Euboea that we had seen on the map, right, where the Persian fleet was drowned, and the fact that 50 triremes or so came to reinforce the Athenians.
Yeah. Although nothing much different happens during the day of the battle, the most interesting things happen during the night, because a Greek traitor shows up at the Persian camp, letting Xerxes and his armies know about a little goat path around the Greek position. This traitor is someone by the name of Ephialtes of Trachis, and you guessed it, he just wants a lot of Persian money, which is why he's betraying the Greek camp. So not only do Greek cities pursue their own interests, but you'll also find that individual Greeks will also pursue their own interests as well. You also saw this in the previous episode during the siege of Eretria, where someone opened the gates, letting all the Persians in. It's not an unusual thing to happen. It's widely morally condemned in the Greek world because obviously it's Medizing. However, that's just a reality of the situation. Now, Leonidas had left about 1,000 Phocians to guard this mountain pass. However, as the Persian army is moving up this pass during the night, they cause such a ruckus, or there's such a great sound, that the Phocians immediately think that the main Persian force is coming up the pass towards them, and so they actually retreat onto higher ground. And so the Persians are actually able to just march straight past them because it's an empty pass, because the Phocians have decided to fall back onto a more defensible position, only to leave this mountain pass wide open. Leonidas does get word of this outflanking maneuver, and so the Greek army then has a little bit of a council to decide what to do next. and it's decided that the vast majority of the Greek forces are going to withdraw. And so Leonidas sends all of the non-Spartan contingents all the way back into back to Greece, back behind the lines, while he and his Spartans will form a rear guard to prevent the Persians from turning what should be an orderly retreat into a rout and a disaster. So the 300 Spartans are to remain, but also different contingents also volunteer to remain as well, such as the 700 Thespians, and also the Thebans, the 400 Thebans also remain at the same time. And so
I think between all contingents of all the cities, right, it was a force of about 2,000 men that stayed behind.
Yeah. And right, and so dawn appears on the third day of battle, 7th in total, I believe. And the Persians are both in front of the Greek army and also behind the Greek army. And at this point, the Greeks really have nothing to lose, in fact, and so they advance further beyond the Phocian wall that they had rebuilt at the start in the prelude to the battle. They advance further from the wall than ever they did before, and this is very much deliberate because it's to
might as well just get the space to attack properly, because anyways you're fucked.
And furthermore, because the Persian army behind them is attacking them as well, the further they move outside of the wall, the further the Persians move in the opposite direction as the retreating Greek army. And
so in this, like the image that's being shared, right, by moving forward to engage the main forces beyond the Phocian wall, like the contingent that we see, right, which is labeled with the Immortals, they will have to move further west to surround the Spartans, and they will not be able to deploy men rapidly to move east to take on the retreating Greek forces.
Yeah, and this is effectively the last stand of the Spartans, and which sort of catapults them into legend as these exceptional and courageous warriors. And this is probably the parts that most people will remember from the Battle of Thermopylae, and it's commemorated in the monuments, a statue to Leonidas on the modern day site of battle. But in addition to these 300 Spartans that die alongside their king, you also have 700 Thespians who are also killed to a man, and they were given the offer to retreat with the rest of the Greeks. However, they chose to stay and fight, and this is not the last time or in their history that a contingent of Thespians will fight to the death voluntarily. It happens multiple times in the city's history. It sort of becomes their thing, really. And in addition to these forces are the 400 Thebans. Now, what happens in the closing stages of this last stand is that the Spartans and Leonidas end up retreating back onto higher ground in order to sort of have a better position against the Persians and also the Persian arrow volleys. And once the Thebans see this, they take their chance and sort of surrender to the Persians. They walk towards their lines with their hands outstretched. And the fate of these Thebans are that all of them end up being captured and also branded by the Persians. And so this sort of originates this sort of very much suspicion of Theban treachery. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the Persians kind of take a pretty dim view about them anyway, so they're kind of like hated by everybody now.
Yeah. Obviously, I think people know how the story ends. Leonidas is killed in the fighting. A massive battle is fought as the Spartans attempt to protect his body from the attacking Persians. It's very much like a scene from, I don't know if people have how much Greek sculpture people have seen, but battles over the fallen bodies of comrades are often depicted as some of the most ferocious fights in a battle.
I guess,
And
Greg, from our podcast example, it would be the Battle of Caronia, where the last stand of the Theban sacred band, when it was
yeah,
completely surrounded by Philip and Alexander's Macedonian army, they fought to the end.
yeah. And the Persians eventually pull back as all of these sort of surviving Spartans and Greeks are sort of defending themselves on the high ground, and they sort of pull back and just let the arrow volleys finish the job, because the Greeks don't really have enough men to sort of form a sort of cohesive phalanx at this point. And at this point, they fought so hard that most of their spears have been shattered, and they're resorting to swords and daggers and having to fight the Persians in close quarters combat. So the Persian logic is, why waste even more of your soldiers fighting the last scraps of this army? Just let the arrow volleys finish them off. And this is what happens.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure with many volleys that had been sent over the preceding days, the shields would have and the armor would have taken like a peppering.
Yeah.
So its integrity is. Though should point out that while this entire force, barring the Thebans, were massacred to a man, not all Spartans died today.
No, they did not.
Yep.
You have 2 Spartan survivors from the battle who actually managed to make their way back to Sparta. And because they survived the battle, in which about 298 of their Spartan comrades were killed defending their king, they come back home in disgrace. One of them commits suicide because of the shame and the ostracism by his fellow Spartans. And the other...
His name was Pantheitis, and he was actually sent by Leonidas to Thessaly as an ambassador, but he did not return in time for battle. That was his only crime.
Yeah.
But that kind of shows a Spartan, their harshness and intolerance, you could call it, in a way.
Yeah, the Spartans can be summed up, I think, with the phrase harsh and also unfair at the same time, as compared to harsh but fair, harsh but unfair, as for the Spartans. And the other survivor will will sort of make a name for himself at the Battle of Plataea. That's a story for another
Aristodemus.
day. Yeah.
Though I should add, this tragic part of Aristodemus. I'm not going to get into what he does at Plataea, but he was actually ordered by King Leonidas, along with another Spartan soldier, Erotis. I'm sorry, I probably screwed up the pronunciation. To return, because both were stricken with illness that claimed their eye.
Yeah.
And according to Herodotus, if both returned to Sparta without, as per the king's orders, that there was a very high chance that the Spartan society would not, brandish them as cowards or failures, because they also were technically following the orders of the superior officer.
Yeah.
Or if it was just Aristodemus who was alone sent back on the orders of the king, he would have been forgiven. But what happened was Eurytius, I'm sorry, I mispronounced the name again, he turns back, even though the disease has now claimed his vision, to fight with the allied Greek contingent at Thermopylae, and died there. And this caused Aristodemus to be viewed as a cowardly traitor by the Spartans, because the other guy returned. Why didn't you?
Yeah.
That's pretty much the logic.
Yeah, much like the modern day people, Greeks love a bit of comparison. Especially if one person comes off looking worse. They love comparison when that happens. And so concludes Battle of Thermopylae. The Spartans are catapulted into legend. They are commemorated in various monuments and also epigram, which is basically poetry. So probably the most
Xerxes
famous...
was pretty pissed off with Leonidas, right?
Yeah.
For this defiance.
Yeah, so pissed off, and Persians, they want to make an example of the people who defy them, so he does chop off Leonidas's head in the aftermath of the battle, as a trophy. And so
This is a good point we
would've-
should mention when we get to Plataea as well. And add like there's a linkage.
Yeah. And so you probably would have heard, it's probably the most common one of the sort of Spartan commemorative lyric poetries. It's the one recorded in Herodotus, where he says, "Here 4,000 from the Peloponnese once fought 3 million. That description is for them all, but the Spartans have their own. Foreigner, go tell the Spartans that we lie here, obedience to their commands." And it's in the voice of all the fallen Spartan soldiers. It's the idea that we died here adhering to Spartan laws and customs. And this sort of this is sort of where the idea that the Spartans don't retreat, that legend, that's where it comes from. And if you read Diodorus Siculus, his histories, he also praises the Spartans effusively. So much praise for their valor, the glory they win, what they sacrificed for Hellas. It's very extensive. I'm not going to read it all. It's literally like an entire, like almost 300-word paragraph. I'm not going to read it all. But beyond all of this praise and commemoration and the sort of Spartan mythology that's built up around the battle, I think it's worth ending on the fact that this is effectively a pretty serious setback for the Greek cause. One of the Spartan kings has just died, in addition to 300 of Sparta's top soldiers. The Greek alliance has now lost both Thessaly, Phocis, and now Boeotia, because the Thebans defect after the battle, because the Persians are able to march all the way into Attica.
And I'll just broadly take over the third day at the Battle of Artemisium as well.
Yeah.
That was when the Persians also attacked in heavy force for the first time. They tended to be more of scouting expeditions, thinking the Greeks are going to cover. And even here, Herodotus said that the Athenians were the best fighters on the Allied side. It's almost like that narrative, right? The Spartans are the superior forces on the land, and the Athenians are on the navy.
Yeah.
Though he did say that the best results were actually achieved by the Egyptians.
Yeah. And
both sides did lose almost an equal number of ships that day, which would have been about 50, 60 ships. But the Persians had enough numbers. They had 1,200 triremes. The Greek contingent at the start of this battle was less than 300. So it's catastrophic that way.
Yeah.
And I think once they got word that the Greek army holding the pass of Thermopylae was, they had withdrawn or had perished, they're like, okay, we need to retreat because there's absolutely no point of being here, because it was a dual strategy that was important.
Yeah. So not only as Plan A, which is hold the Persians in Thessaly, that never came about. Plan B was the holding them at Thermopylae and Artemisium. That plan has now fallen apart. And so the Greeks are now on Plan C, which leads to the Battle of Salamis. And I'm going to just finish off by sort of we've
before
heard
you just
about how
do
this
I'll just say maybe we could just talk a little bit of the losses. According to Herodotus, around 4,000 Greeks were casualties, though it's up for debate whether the 1,000 Phocians who were guarding the mountain pass were actually killed, or were they just fled, right? Because casualties is also inclusive of that. Whereas the Persians lost between 20 to 30,000 men defending that, taking the pass. No doubt most of them coming on the first day, and their immortals actually took a beating.
Yeah.
The number was definitely not 10,000 for the rest of the campaign.
No, it was not.
And at the concurrent Battle of Artemisium, which started with about 270 ships for the Greeks, led by Themistocles, and 1,200 for the the Persians. At the end, the Athenians mostly suffered most of the Greek casualties of the 100 ships that were lost, which was quite a big blow for the total Greek naval strength.
Yeah.
And the Persians lost about 400 ships, most of them being stragglers from the storm lost expeditions. Even though they lost more ships in combat than the Greeks, it wasn't a decisive ratio, you could say.
Yeah.
And the loss of 100 triremes right now for the Greeks is pretty big.
Definitely. Although there's a lot of sort of mythology and sort of commemoration of this Battle of Thermopylae, it is worth remembering that the Greeks come off definitely the worst, because both of their plans to defend, to hold them outside of Attica, have effectively fallen apart. And so Attica is now wide open for a Persian army to march straight through. And
I'll just also say that the plan C, which was also decided at the time Themistocles proposed this dual strategy, was to blockade the Isthmus of Corinth, which the Athenians really hated.
Yeah. Plan C, as concocted by the Spartans and the Peloponnesians, just conveniently misses out defending Athens and just building a wall just behind Athens. So Athens takes the brunt of the Persian invasion.
And not to mention, barring Plataea, the entire region north of Attica is pretty much, that's Persian.
Yeah. All of that falls to Persia. And so Herodotus actually calls the Battle of Thermopylae a Laconian disaster. It's not really, although he includes this sort of romantic lyric poetry commemorating Spartan valor and Spartan adherence to their own laws. That's sort of the Spartan version of the tale. When he sort of pops over back into the Persian perspective and looking at the actions of the Persian fleet after the battle, he actually describes it as the Laconian disaster. So this is very much a massive setback for the Greek cause, but it's not the end of the war
yet. Not to mention, the decision of the fallback is going to have a pretty intense debate in the upcoming weeks between Athens and the other states, because it's not only going to be Sparta that's on the opposite side of this equation, but that's definitely something we need to talk about as Salamis.
Well, all right. I am so glad that you all did the heavy lifting. I barely got to even pitch in this one, but this was awesome to
Next time, Craig.
Yeah, to hear all of this done so thoroughly, because actually, like I said before I was the Pacific War channel, I was a general history channel, and I was tackling just ancient Greece in the beginning. So I had covered Thermopylae, but this is excellent to hear. And before I let the audience go, I just want to remind everyone, if you're not checking us out on YouTube, I mean, please do so. We've put up numerous maps explaining the geography of Greece, Macedonia, Thrace, and such, the overall movement, logistical chain of the Persian campaign. There was a 3-phase map for the Battle of Thermopylae, so there's a lot of visuals in this. And if you'd like to further support the channel, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to an exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights for the subjects I'll tackle next. But a big thanks to our guest, Daniel. You knocked it out of the park again, and I'm really excited for Salamis.
Yep. Always a pleasure. And I actually did my A-level Greek on the Battle of Salamis, Herodotus' account of it. So it's a little blast from the past.
So trip down memory lane for you.
Yeah.
And I do admit, I love the Battle of Salamis way more than Thermopylae and Plataea personally. It's more interesting to me. And definitely, to me, the Battle of the Greco-Persian Wars. Not even Marathon also comes close.
So we got a very exciting episode coming up. Until next week, guys. Bye.
Take care.